All right, welcome to the latest edition of Papillion UnScripted, the place to go to hear from people who truly make Papillion feel like home. We have a very special guest this week, taking us pretty much around the world to Dr. Ryan Newburn, who is a native of Papillion, who is now in Iceland, and he's got an amazing story, and we're going to tell more of his story. Ryan, we appreciate you taking the time and coming on with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk about my adventures.
You have some amazing adventures. Following your story is incredible. I want to start at the beginning, though. Growing up in Papillion, what was your teenage years? What was your young life here in Papillion like?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that my young life in Papillion was like most others. Growing up in suburban America, we had it pretty good. We were just talking about Papillion days a few seconds ago, and there's that nice, comfortable lifestyle that Papillion offers, and I can't complain at all. Growing up as well, my parents, they owned an Italian restaurant in Council Bluffs, Iowa, called Sam's Italian Villa.
Oh yeah,
and, yeah. Have you been there?
Yeah, I went there. I probably went there like the first month I was here. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it's awesome.
Small world. Yeah, no. So my mom actually got that from my grandfather after he passed, and that was pretty much my childhood, was growing up around like that sort of environment. And it was very much it was a good thing and a bad thing. I was well taken care of, but at the same time I kind of had an overabundance of these sorts of things, like of food and of just like comfort. So throughout my childhood, I did struggle with like obesity and just being overweight in school and not doing really sports or activities or anything like that. Kind of an unhealthy lifestyle formed from these habits going into my teenage years.
We're going to get to a lot of the excitement and adventure stuff, but it seems like, just reading your story, that the weight loss, the obesity, that's something that kind of always, to use a pun, weighed on you throughout your life. What is that feeling now when you think back on that time when you weighed what you did, how uncomfortable you were? What's those memories like?
Well, the thing is when you're overweight, like a large portion of your life, like it kind of just never goes away. Both inward and outward, I would say. Like inward, you kind of like, especially when it starts at a young age, you develop like these sorts of like insecurities that, they turn into trauma going into adulthood. Now with that being said, those insecurities have remained inside of me, but they've also propelled me towards what I've done since then. Kind of like this, this built up rage to do better. Really drove me to start experimenting and, kind of thinking outside the box of what I can do. And had it not been for those traumas, like I wouldn't be where I am now.
My oldest kid is a gamer. There's a lot of that. Also a Pokemon card collector. Talk to me about how kind of a kid's game, but got you from here, Papillion, over to Japan. How did that end up happening?
Yeah. So one of my first dreams as a kid, I remember, going to like a Walmart one day with my mom, and I was going to there's like a magazine section, like a little aisle with all the magazines in it. And I saw this glossy magazine, and it said Yu-Gi-Oh on it. So I picked it up and I started looking at it, and I didn't know anything about it, but it looked cool. And I was flipping the pages, and I saw that there was coverage that year of the 2003 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championships. And it was such a cool thing. I was looking and I was seeing these Japanese players like competing, as some of the best in the world. And it showed, what sorts of cards they were using against each other. And it was the top of the top. And it got my attention right away. So that kind of ended up, developing me towards learning more about this game and getting better at it, and starting to develop my skills. So where I lacked in physical activity and stuff in school, I obsessed over this new game, which became my first dream to kind of get to the level that these Japanese players did in that magazine. And I played this game from that moment in 2003. So I was 13 years old, 12, 13, something like that. all the way up until 19, I was competing in this game, getting better and better through failure. And then eventually in 2019, I finally got a big break, and I ended up placing third place at the US National Championships out of 1,200 people. So it was in that moment where I kind of had like a paradigm shift, where I realized that like through persistence, I could do these kind of like these things that I thought were just kind of like unattainable. You know what I mean? I'd been competing against thousands of US players, for 7+ years to get to this stage where I ended up being on the world stage. I went to Tokyo, Japan to compete against these players, basically that I saw in the magazine, at the age of 12, 13 years old. So it was that sort of thing that made me realize that I could kind of push the boundaries more and more. And that really changed my mindset throughout. So
after that, I was in the Army, and I think anybody that's gone through basic, there's always one or two people get hurt, and they have to get recycled. You went into the Navy, was injured, but they didn't get recycled then. You couldn't go back through after the injury?
Yeah, so funny story. After I, was done playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I was trying to like find my next thing in life, and like you said, the Navy was that thing. Mm-hmm. I was very overweight at the time, so I remember I had to lose weight during that time, like around 100 pounds to get in. They wouldn't let me in either, like if I didn't lose that weight. Also at the time, I remember that I went out one day to a football field with my friends and played some football. And I ended up breaking my ankle by tripping over one of my friends. And I got like a plate and some screws put into my ankle back in 2008. So, like the doctor said, it's fine. Just keep it in the rest of your life as long as it doesn't cause you any issues. So fast forward, I lose all that weight. I'm running on concrete every day around my neighborhood trying to lose weight. Eventually I started feeling some weirdness in my ankle. And at that time I had lost the weight. I had been in delayed entry program for the Navy. So I was just waiting to get in. So I just decided to ignore the weird feeling in my ankle. Well, I go to boot camp and I start running in the combat boots and stuff. And it starts to get painful. Yeah. Because, you got to tie those things really, really tight, tried ignoring it. I noticed a bump in my ankle where my scar was. The screw was getting bigger, like below it, the skin. And I remember finally going to medical, and they said that the screw had actually broken off of my ankle, and it was like unscrewing itself from my ankle. So, I mean, the doctor looked at that and he was like, "Son, you're going home." Wow. So it was tough words. I ended up going home, and I got the surgery to have all of my hardware removed. I healed up, and my plan was actually to go back into the Navy. But because there was a prior medical condition now on my record, and the Navy was so like overstaffed, like everyone was trying to get in, they just said no because, they could essentially. So
that's obviously a setback that could have really set your whole life back. What was the decision then? And when do we get to the point to where you sell everything and move to Japan?
I love it. We're really fast forwarding right now because I've told the same story in like a 2-hour time span usually is what it takes. But we'll do a very brief summation. Yeah. So, I healed up, and, after they told me no in the Navy, I kind of reached a little bit of like a low point in my life, not sure of what to do. And I remember some old classmates of mine called me up one day. They were lifting at the gym, and I had lost all this weight running, and, they were like, "Hey, come lift with us," and I remember joining that group and feeling like I had something again, lifting with them encouraging me encouraging them. And they really propped me up. So like once I started getting motivated again after this kind of like downward spiral, I realized that I needed to make like the next big move. And I remember one day a buddy of mine called me and he said, like, just out of the blue, "Let's go to Japan. Like, let's move there." I'm like, "How do you move to Japan? That isn't like, what do you mean?" It's like, "I have no idea. Let's figure it out." And I remember he ended up kind of dropping the idea the next day or like a few days later, but it stuck with me like, oh, how do I move to Japan? This sounds interesting. And I joined the Navy, to travel and stuff. So I was like, well, maybe if I can't, join the Navy, I'll travel on my own. So basically I started like kind of looking at Japan, and I was like, oh, Japan, it looks kind of small, maybe I can just walk across it, Right. And of course, these were delusions in my mind. And I was just like, oh, Japan's small. Will be a walk on the beach the whole time. It'll be great. Campfires, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I developed this plan where I was going to walk across Japan, and I adopted this name, the Straw Hat Backpacker.
Right.
And I was going to be this guy who would sell all his stuff and just pack up on a one-way ticket to Japan and, see where the world takes me from that point. And yeah, actually, Scott from Canfields, I don't know if you ever went to Canfields back in the day.
Sure.
Yeah, he ended up,
Did the Boy Scout stuff there.
yeah, didn't we all, right?
Yeah.
He ended up actually sponsoring part of my journey. He paid for, like, he covered my gear and stuff with the, gear at the store. Super nice guy. And the whole community, like Papillion, Omaha, really supported me in all this, like, so it was a really nice feeling as I left. I left the day after my birthday, March 4th, 2014. And yeah, the rest is history.
So we read through your entire story, my wife and I, last night. At the very end, all she wants to know is what happened to the guy who had the idea to go to Japan? Because obviously he didn't go with you. Whatever happened to him?
Yeah, his name is Ryan too, funnily enough. And he plays poker now professionally in Florida. So he ended up going down his own path. And that's just it, man. We all have our own paths to go down. We follow what interests us, and they can lead down extraordinarily different paths. But, as long as we're happy at the end of the day.
I've had a chance to travel quite a little bit with the Army. And the one place I've never been, I really want to go, is New Zealand. How did you go from Japan to New Zealand? Seems like very different kind of areas and land masses and everything else. How'd you end up there?
Well, the commonality between the two is they're both very, very safe countries. And since it was my first time really leaving the US, aside from my Japanese trip prior, I wanted to go to places where I didn't really have to worry about like my safety in that regard. Okay. As I got better at traveling. But it was always my plan to go to New Zealand next, because I found out as an American citizen, we can get working holiday visas before we're 30 there. So my idea was, I spent a year saving up my money working at the casino in Council Bluffs to go to Japan. And then once I used that money, I would then go to New Zealand and get a job there and start saving money. And then walk across New Zealand, because there was a very famous trail that had just opened up recently called the Te Araroa, which crossed New Zealand, like through the backcountry from the northern island down to the southern island.
Did you feel like you were, and I think Lord of the Rings had already come out, but they're kind of walking across New Zealand as well, right?
Oh, I'm a huge nerd. If there's one thing you'll take from this, I'm the biggest nerd. That's part of the reason I chose New Zealand too. I wanted to feel like, and it's funny because I actually ended up buying like a little replica Ring of Power from the Shire right. studio, and I went to Mount Narahoe where they filmed Mount Doom, and I actually threw it into the volcano. So wow. There you go.
That's awesome. I always appreciate people who make a career for themselves out of something they really love. Where did it go from shooting pictures, being a photographer because you liked it, to where it became a profession for you?
Yeah, that's a very long going story, but the gist of it is I left for Japan. I had like a little digital camera. I didn't really know anything about photography back then. I just started taking pictures of the things that I would encounter, the nature, and I kind of just fell in love with it as the years went on. When I was in New Zealand, my mom got me like a DSLR camera that I started like using, just like a basic one, and I started taking pictures with that. Mm-hmm. And then really the big growth came when I went to Iceland. So when I moved to Iceland in 2018, it was at that point where like I was set on photography. I wanted to do photography for sure, along with these walks that I was doing. But the funny thing about Iceland is it's such a small country, and there's so many world-renowned photographers that want to go and shoot Iceland. So it's like when you live there, you're in a small pond with a lot of big fish, and it's very easy to find those big fish and learn from them. Mm-hmm. So I made friends with some people that I looked up to in the photography community at the time, and I was a glacier guide at the time too. So I also had something to offer them as well. I would take them up onto the glaciers and stuff, and like we kind of just exchanged this knowledge of photography from them for these experiences. And I grew more and more as a photographer very quickly in Iceland compared to the other countries.
You reference yourself as a nerd. I consider myself a nerd as well. I love the television show Ragnarok on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the most beautiful place in the world where they shoot it near where you live. Do you ever get to the point where you're out there shooting, you're like, I can't believe this was made. This is here, as beautiful as this is.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason that like I was driven so much with my photography, especially when I came out to Iceland.
Mhm.
There's been nights where I've just been driving, and as the northern lights have been dancing above the sky, it's just like you're in a different universe, or you're on Asgard or something.
Yeah.
There's just it's otherworldly, and especially owning a glacier tour company, we go and we explore and discover ice caves to lead clients into, and every time we discover an ice cave, it's such a magical experience, because it's a place in the world that didn't exist the year before and isn't going to exist the next year. It's a temporary place in time. So yeah, it always inspires me as a photographer.
I think most people know what NFTs are at this point. But how did you take your photography and what non-fungible tokens are and combine them? And I know the end of this month, you're going to be going, some of your pictures will be in New York City for an event there. Can you kind of walk us through how that transition happened?
Yeah, so this is all kind of transpired in the last year. I got into NFTs in May of 2021, and it was because actually the big fish that I had learned a lot from, her name is Kath Simmerd, and she had gotten into NFTs when it was starting to get big for photographers, and she was kind of one of the first ones. She's a very good friend of mine, and I hadn't really been paying too much attention to NFTs. And then one day in May, I saw that she sold one of her photos for $16,000.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, I need to make a phone call.
Yeah.
So, we started talking, and she explained everything. Like Twitter is like the main place for selling your NFTs to collectors and stuff like that. So she's like, you need to talk on Twitter. You need to network yourself, create this brand that's totally separate from like Web2 brands like Instagram, Facebook, so yeah, like I got very lucky to start. I hopped on Twitter, and I remember thinking like, what's my first tweet going to be? I had 2 followers, nobody followed me or anything. Nobody like, how am I going to do this? So I followed everyone that she was following. And I just decided like, you know what, I'm going to make this tweet of a picture of an ice cave, a picture of the volcano, because the volcanic eruption was last year. And I title it Ice versus Fire. Which do you prefer? And I tweeted it, and I went to bed, and I woke up the next day, and it ended up getting like 100 retweets and like 500 or 600 likes. And I was like totally caught off guard. So then Kath messages me, and she was like, Ryan, oh my God, like what? Like Vince just retweeted. I'm like, your work, like who's Vince? And she was like, he's the biggest photography collector, and he likes your work. You should list it, So I'm like, I didn't know what was going on. This was day one of me going into NFTs. So I'm like, okay, well, what do I list this for? Like, how do I do this, So, she talks to me and gives me advice and stuff. And I go on to Foundation, where you sell your photos as NFTs. And I see that I have 2 followers, the person who invited me onto Foundation and Vince. So I'm like, oh man, he's waiting for something,
Right.
So I ended up listing them each for 3 Ethereum, which is roughly $4,000 each, or I'm sorry, $8,000 US each. So, and within like, I think 2 or 3 hours, they had both sold to him. He bought them both. So suddenly,
Wow.
a day after talking to Kath, I sold 2 of my photos for $16,000, and it was just like a life changer for me. And in these 12 months, that was just the start. I ended up selling a full-on Ice and Fire collection for about 20 Ethereum. And then we just did Metascapes, which that was the biggest project I've ever done of my life, where me and Kath, the girl that I talked to you about, and a guy named Yuri, we put all of our photos together into an AI GAN system. And basically, like what it does is it looks at your photos and it creates its own AI landscapes. And yeah, it's really neat. I'll send you a link afterward to what it looks like. But basically, the GAN learns to make photographs through seeing your photographs. So, and it also learns your styles and stuff too, So we would have like AI auroras, AI volcanoes, AI ice caves and stuff. And we ended up selling that as a collection, and we ended up each making about 250 Ethereum off of that. So, I mean, it literally within the last 12 months, it's been insane. It's been absolutely that crazy.
How do you, so you had to pick 3 photos for the NFT event in New York City, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Out of everything you ever shot?
Yep.
How do you pick 3?
There's certain pieces that you pride yourself in as a photographer more than others. Like, I mean, I would say there's more than 3, but like for me, like there it wasn't too hard. Like I knew which ones like were kind of like my trophies, you know. So I also like you know, certain photos of mine really they really showcase me as like my brand in particular. Like I'm known for kind of shooting auroras, and like that was kind of like something that I wanted to highlight in these 3 images.
So what's a day like for this kid from Papillion who lives in Iceland now? What does your day consist of?
So right now I'm actually working on my company a lot. I have a glacier tour company in Iceland, as I said, and we're looking to really build that up. And yeah, like you know, I love what NFTs have done for me, but man, it takes like 100% of your focus, like when you're working on it and stuff. And I find that like there's a double-edged sword, like how do they say, like a double-edged sword with everything, you know? So it's like there's pros and there's cons, you know, like and like now I want to kind of get back towards just like, you know, more of like building like an actual like company and just working on this and like getting outside and going on tours and stuff and having some fun in nature. So
what's the best way for somebody if they decided that they wanted to go to Iceland and be a part of one of these tours? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so I have a website called icepickjourneys.is. So basically all of our tours come with photo packages. We take your picture, so you have a nice memory when you go back to home to Nebraska or wherever you're from. And yeah, so you just visit the website, or you can send me an email at ryan@icejourney.is.
What do you miss most about Papillion or Nebraska?
Chipotle. No. Of course, I miss my family. I miss the suburban vibe as well. You know, like we grew up in an area where you can really just stretch your legs and drive and like just like feel like you're in a countryside, you know. And Iceland's like that, but when you're in Reykjavik, it's a lot more condensed. So I kind of miss this whole like you know, suburban lifestyle a little bit too.
Last thing, you've already kind of lived a full life, a lifetime into your, what are you, 35?
32, right? I think.
32.
Yeah, I'm 32.
Sorry for making you too old. What's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for now, just like I said, I just want to build my company, but like I also want to build my photography brand as well. You know, like I'm hopeful with NFTs going into the future and selling my work as NFTs. And yeah, I just want to keep innovating, keep pushing outside the box, because ever since that young age of 12, like I've realized that if you push outside the box, you're going to get crazy, unexpected results. But a lot of times those results will be life-changing. I mean, had you told me that like I would be, you know, working as owning a glacier company in Iceland, you know, from reading a Yu-Gi-Oh magazine, I would have said you were nuts. But, you know, that's where awesome. It took me.
Ryan, we really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. Good luck and be safe out there.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Join us next time as we continue our conversations with people who truly make Papillion feel like home.